I'm Allendale's chief meteorologist Ryan Martin with a look at your midday weather update. It's an interesting scenario that's coming before us here as we take a look at the midday model runs. Models are actually in fairly decent agreement on the next couple of systems and, honestly, their timing as well. Looking at some moisture coming into the Central Plains as we go through the later stages of this week, particularly from later tomorrow through Thursday and into early Friday. The GFS shows that. The European doesn't deny it. And then as we get into our next big front, which comes next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday, they agree on that system, on a front that comes through. What's really interesting, though, is where they disagree, which is on the magnitude. The European blows this sucker up into a huge, huge front. I just took a look at the latest combined or cumulative precipitation forecasts from the European, and the European is putting down 8 inches of rain or more over parts of Missouri, southern Iowa, and into Illinois as you go basically from right now, today, on through Thursday of next week. That seems to me to be a little bit over the top. By the same stretch of the imagination, the GFS honestly has gone the other way, and talking about this as being a fairly minor event, as in, maybe a quarter to a half an inch over a couple of days, and that's it. So I think, more than likely, the real solution is probably somewhere in between. And really, this first push of moisture is what's going to be the most interesting to watch develop as we go from late tomorrow through Friday across the Central Plains and then into the southwestern Corn Belt. I'm specifically looking at Missouri. To me, this continues to look like it wants to be an event that's mostly along and south of I-70. If it goes north at all, it's going to be in Missouri. And right now, I'm looking at rain totals that are still going to be probably on the order of a half to 1 inch. Coverage, though, in Kansas, maybe only 50%. You get into Missouri, Illinois, and across that I-70 corridor southward, we might be able to push that to about 70%. But it looks like it's going to be a deal where cloud cover and moisture hangs around for several days, but the heaviest rains kind of shift around within the zone. So, for example, as we go through Friday, I think the heaviest rains will be over Missouri into Illinois. Saturday, I think they shift back south and west, and maybe they hit Arkansas a little bit better. And then as we go into Sunday, the moisture stays there, but it's just light and spreads up to the north and east across parts of central southern Indiana into Ohio. So I don't think it's going to be a one place gets hammered over and over and over deal. But then what really is going to be interesting is to see how the next system develops. The European brings a monster low in and digs it in classic winter storm fashion, coming down through parts of Colorado into the Texas Panhandle and then hooking that sucker northeast right through the heart of the Corn Belt. The GFS, on the other hand, decides, no, this is really not that big of a deal. Then takes the low basically down into, parts of Iowa, and then just meanders it through the Great Lakes. Once again, the solution is probably somewhere in between. I think the GFS is much too quick in passing this off as a minor deal, but I also think that the European model is way overdone. And part of the reason for that is just a bias of the model. The European model just kicks complete tail in the winter with these major winter storms. It's a good winter model, and a lot of times it's a little bit of an overzealous winter model. So if we're looking at this low, digging in on the European the way you would expect a classic winter storm to do, I think it's just a little bit too ahead of the ball game. So I'm gonna take a kind of a conservative approach. I like 1/2 to 1 and in spots 2 inches of rain out of that low and that front that moves through as we go through next week. I'm going to skew the best rains along and south of I-80, although I do think probably 70 to 80% of the Corn Belt in and of itself will get decent moisture out of that. From there, the models continue to show a drier period coming in from the second half of next week. Let's just say from the 16th right on through about the 21st, 22nd. GFS brings a suspect system in around the 21st, 22nd. I didn't like it this morning. I still don't like it here at midday. I think it's wrong. We're actually going to be seeing a nice upper-level ridge trying to build in the wake of that front that comes through next week. So I actually look for temperatures to be normal to above. I think that'll steer most precipitation away from the region. So I'm looking at a decent harvest window there after next week's front, and then we'll gear up for probably another system trying to come in toward the end of the month of October. We are in a pattern now where we're starting to see some fairly powerful storms trying to come together in the Gulf of Alaska, throwing waves of energy in against the British Columbia coast, the Pacific Northwest coast, and this is a pattern that will eventually lead to a little bit more active weather across the country as a whole it's the kind of pattern we start to typically see across the region in October, November, December. We are probably going to be seeing this lead to some winter-type storms sooner rather than later, but at this point I don't think there's any cause for alarm either on cold air or massive amounts of winter precipitation or precipitation in general for that matter. The key will be watching very closely what the European does with this storm system. Will it be insistent on keeping it super strong and powerful, or will it back off, and will we see a more conservative approach, which is what we here at Allendale think we're likely going to see out of this. Otherwise, the rest of the weather forecast pattern domestically and internationally is unchanged. Still looking at several fronts coming into Brazil, southern Brazil and Argentina, having trouble getting some of that moisture farther north in crop areas, but toward the end of the forecast period, 16th, 17th, on toward the 20th, we are seeing another front that works in to central northern Argentina, and that will help with bean plantings down there. In the meantime, if you've got any questions about the weather, give us a shout here at Allendale. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin.